Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Blush Studio. Today I'm going to take you behind the scenes while I create this realistic bumblebee illustration. And while my fingers are busy, I'm going to be sharing with you just some of my different tips and tricks for drawing realistically. Now, if you've already taken my flower drawing challenge, then some of this will be a little bit of a review for you. Not all of it, but some of it. The great thing, though, about learning to draw things realistically and really honing your art skills and becoming serious about your artwork is that it can teach you these disciplines, these tips can teach you how to draw anything that you want, not just flowers, not just insects like this. You could draw people, architecture, clothing, leaves, flowers, all of it. So if you did take the flower drawing challenge, or if you haven't taken it yet and you're interested, I'll have that link down below. Some of this will be review because the tools and the lessons that you learned there can be applied across the board. So, again, for those of you who've taken the flower drawing challenge, this will be no surprise to you. I am working off of a photograph. I actually found this photo on Pinterest, and I will be linking it down below, my exact photo that I'm working off of. I usually work off of one or two photos when I'm looking for something specific. That just kind of helps me if something looks a little funny, like I'm really struggling with these wings, so I might like find another bee from the same angle and try and figure out, okay, what's throwing me off? What is, not coming off right? Is it this particular photograph, or do I need to kind of figure out how to capture this? Another thing that I do is I always start in pencil. Now, not every artist does this. Some people are confident enough to just dive in with ink. My style is tight and realistic enough, and really frankly, I'm just more comfortable working in pencil first before going into ink. But there's not a right or a wrong way to do this. So feel free to jump in with ink if you're ready, but if you're not, go ahead and start with pencil. The pencil that I'm using, I'll have linked down below. It's just a lead holder, basically, and so you can kind of switch out which pencil lead you prefer. So I'm just lightly sketching everything out, and I always call this process mapping, and it's just kind of like I want to make sure that everything is where I want it to be. I don't necessarily have every detail kind of sketched in, but I know where everything's going to go so that when I can come back with the ink, I can go in really confidently. So that's starting to look pretty good. You can see that this is larger than an actual bumblebee, and I do recommend working larger rather than same size or smaller. It's just a lot easier to work that way. Now I'm going to take my Micron 01 and just start with the ink. Now my favorite part about these bumblebees are the little texture elements, just because they're fuzzy, and so I wanted to have some fun with that. You can see I started off with a couple of flicks in this line before moving into the smoother areas of his face. And that's one thing that you want to look for when you are illustrating really anything, is just variations in texture and line that you can capture and that will help to capture the essence of the subject. Now I'm not drawing every little fuzzball that this little guy has. I'm kind of letting it come and go gracefully so that it doesn't get distracting to the overall shape of the bumblebee itself. Part of my job as an illustrator is to translate for my viewer, so the audience currently, you are one of my viewers, just to translate for them what is actually there without overwhelming the senses. I don't want to distract from the shape of the body by drawing every single hair. I also don't want to be too formula, so I don't want to do like two little fluff balls and then a straight line, and then two little fluffs and then a straight line. That gets really predictable and is not as interesting. So I've kind of decided where I want to have the majority of the texture, and it's also going to help divide the body into its different sections as well. So I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone there by just having the majority of the texture that I'm drawing, which is just kind of those little flicks that show that this guy's kind of hairy, be where there's another junction or where I already have to show that something is happening or changing. And then the great thing is that it contrasts with these smooth wings, with the smooth antennae, and then kind of the smoother areas of his face to make a more interesting composition altogether. Now you can see I'm kind of flicking my pen here. That is because as the lines move towards the interior of the wing, I want them to get lighter. I don't want to draw every single line that's on these wings, every single shadow or element. I just want to imply it because, again, I don't want to overwhelm my viewer. I want to show them this is delicate, and it gets more delicate as it moves into the center. So I do that by allowing my pen strokes to get lighter towards the center. And I do that with just that flicking that you were seeing. Now, one question that I'm asked a lot is, where do you start drawing something? And I really don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. I just think you need to start somewhere and follow your photograph or your reference in order to kind of help it to come all together. Now, for flowers in general, I like to start at the center, and with like portraits, I like to start with the eyes and then work my way out. But something like this, I tend to start and just follow the contour, so the outline, but I'm not afraid to kind of go back and to jump around a little bit, especially because I have that pencil guide that will help me to kind of stay on track. So like even though I went around the body, I wasn't feeling quite ready to start in on the legs yet, and so I went in and I helped to continue to define some of the areas. So I'm kind of sketching in where the stripes for the bumblebee are, and then like adding in the other wings before I start in on the more complicated lower section. So don't feel like you have to like start somewhere and stick there. Go ahead and bounce around if you want a little bit. Now with this wing, same ideas with the other wing, and even just what we've been starting to do with the stripes of the bumblebee itself. The areas that are close to the body, I want to be thicker than the areas that are farther out, and really just the exterior itself. And as I'm adding kind of little details and elements to the inside of the wing, I want those to get lighter, again, the closer that they get to the center of the wing. That's just to help keep it from being too distracting and to allow it to look light and airy. So now that we're getting into the legs themselves, because there are quite a few of them, one thing that I'm worried about while I'm creating this is that the junction between the different sections of the limbs is interesting. I don't want it to just look like little sausages. I want them to have some variance, and I am looking to my photograph for this because I want to make it look natural, make it look realistic, but I don't want it to just be formula. I don't want it to be like sausage links that are coming together. I want, if there's a more elegant line, I'm looking for that. I want to capture that. So you can see that first one up there, there's almost like a calf on that section, that second section of the leg itself. That was there in my photograph, and I wanted to capture it and even exaggerate a little bit so that it's obvious and it looks a little bit more graceful overall. So this guy's a little bit fuzzy and it comes together, but more so in the back than in the front. It has a calf, but it's not quite as exaggerated, and so I'm adding that in. And then I can go in and add kind of that underbelly section. So adding some more texture. Again, the great thing about this coming and going and him being kind of a fluffy little guy is that I can kill two birds with one stone by showing the texture of his body, but also define the space that separates the legs and the body. So by his legs, it's going to be a little bit fuzzier, and kind of elsewhere, it's going to be smoother, so that there's just more differentiation. So another way that I can kind of translate to my viewer what's going on without having to draw every single line. So during this season, I have pretty much everything kind of filled in, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of leaning my head back. You'll see that I'll like pause and my hand will go back a little bit. It's because I'm kind of assessing how everything is looking. And a good way to do that is to kind of step back. If you're really struggling with an illustration, it's usually a good idea to even walk away from it or look at it in a mirror or just step farther away from it. A lot of times something that, especially if you feel like something is off, it will jump out at you and you'll notice it right away if you're kind of backing up, and you can add a few more details here, back up and see how that looks, and add a few more details here, or maybe erase something that just got a little too complicated. And then, so like I'm deepening this line here because I want to show that the wing comes above the body and not that it is one with the body. And just kind of to help, again, I'm defining that space. I don't want that to disappear into the body. I want it to be obvious that the wing is above the body. And that is where I ended for this bumblebee, although I did end up going back the next day and shading this little guy. I just ended up having so much fun with him and falling in love with him that I went back and added some shading. I didn't film it though. I wasn't even thinking about that. But if you'd be interested in seeing a tutorial more on shading, I have a full course, but I'd be happy to do kind of a quick tutorial for you just on shading and kind of how I process that and do that. If you're interested in my flower drawing challenge, which again applies to elements that are not flowers, I'll have that link down below. And until next time, happy drawing!